Hey everyone, it's Matt and Dan, and we're here with you on today New Brunswick, tomorrow the world, being represented by my friend and colleague here with some of the
Yes.
spiffy merch, which made its way
Yes.
from one end of this vast continent to the other. So good on you, sir. That's what I'm going to
Yes,
say
indeed.
as my opening gambit. How are things going, Dan?
Not too bad. Not too bad. It's the weather's actually kind of nice here, so like got to hang out on the deck for a bit earlier today, and actually had a long weekend on the long weekend for once. So
Sweet. Did you
yeah.
grill any? Did you grill any meats on the weekend?
Yes, there was some barbecuing done today as well. Um,
I'm a sanctimonious vegan, but I'm not gonna take that away from you. I'm not gonna.
mhm.
I'm gonna let you enjoy that for what
Yeah,
it is because, man, why wouldn't you? Right? That's
I appreciate that.
totally. And yeah, so it is the Victoria Day here.
hmm
In your province, it's the Victoria Day. In my province, it's the Victoria Day. Um, Elsewhere in Canada, notably the province of Quebec, it is not Victoria Day. It's something else. I didn't know this
hmm
until just doing my, perfunctory research for the show. National Patriots Day is what they're celebrating. I mean, I'm sure and even just to sort of skim a bit from the Wikipedia, it was originally unofficially Fête du Doulard, a commemoration initiated in the 20s to coincide with Victoria Day. So they actually
Okay.
had their own holiday kind of glommed on top of it, and now it's subsequently been officially a stat holiday as of the past 20 years or something. National Patriots Day to
hmm
commemorate the those who have tried to move it forward in terms of democracy and I suppose independence within the Belle Province.
Yeah.
So that kind of brings us to the topic, Dan. We're
hmm
doing we're doing Quebec music here, are we not?
Yeah. Yeah, we're doing it. It's another one of our sort of regional favorites kind of episodes, and
Cool.
this yeah, for this episode, I figured we'd take a look at Quebec, just
Sure.
because around the time when I was trying to think of an episode topic, I saw that a particular band from Montreal that I quite enjoy, the Nils,
Okay.
were doing some reunion shows, and they were actually playing in Fredericton later this summer, apparently.
What? Sweet.
Yeah, as part of a little festival that folks organizing, I guess. And it just made me think, like, hey, plenty of good. Like Montreal's kind of like I've always thought of it as kind of like Canada's San Francisco in a lot of ways, or like
Good
Canada's Bay
analogy.
Area.
Yeah.
And just by virtue of that, it's produced a lot of good music of a lot of different. I mean, it's definitely got its own particular vibes for a lot of. It's not like there's one particular sound, but there's definitely a collection of sounds that I very much associate with, like, oh yeah, that band's totally from Montreal.
Well, that's rad because I mean,
Yeah.
honestly, for me, I realized when I was kind of getting this together from my end that there's actually my lack of knowledge is actually pretty vast in terms of this. I
hmm
don't know why I would have thought otherwise, but for me, this is going to be largely an educational experience because hearing from you, and then as well, in the post-show notes, I'm looking forward to kind of chasing some stuff down a little bit more through Wikipedia,
Yeah.
Discogs, and just the good old Googles.
hmm
And in my case, at least, the stuff that I've come up with, the artists actually are enough of same projects that for me, this is almost like a natural continuation of the previous episode,
Yeah.
wherein we looked at artists from, who kind of are at the center of various things, right?
hmm
So I'm going to be really curious, Dan, to hear who your, first artist or artists would be in this case.
Well, I guess we might as well start at the beginning here, or start with
Okay.
the earliest favorite. I guess in terms of my, not necessarily in terms of like their existence on the timeline, but just on my
Okay,
own personal timeline.
sure.
And let me just preface this, Matt. Did you ever have like like a teenage ska phase?
I wish that I was cool enough to be able to just unequivocally say yes.
Ah,
I'm actually this is actually one of the areas like in music where I'm like I'm trying to redress some past issues. I
mm-hmm,
got an Amazon delivery this afternoon with the selector, ska, two tone, whatever,
mm-hmm.
just sitting
Oh,
there
yeah,
waiting to be discovered by me once we're finished with this. So
nice.
long way of saying no, but
Ah,
I'm going to anticipate your answer to this as being yes.
I would definitely, I definitely did. A lot of that
Okay.
was because of, early love of bands like Operation Ivy, who we've talked about on
Yes.
the show before.
Of course. Yeah.
But just for a particular Canadian flavor, there was one band that I really latched onto early on,
Okay.
um, that were kind of a little ahead of the curve in some things and just kind of off on their own level in another, which is Montreal's Me Mom and Morgenthaler, uh, who
I've heard the
they were,
name and I love the name.
yeah,
And folks, just like for the non, whatever Gen X Canadian Atlantic cohort, you just got to know that Morgenthaler was like the first what major abortion advocate in
yeah,
Canada. Uh,
that was kind of, he was one of the really, yeah, one of
with
the
a with
real
with his
pioneers.
with a pioneer of abortion with
Yeah,
a clinic, a much controversial clinic in Fredericton, as a matter of
yes,
fact. So
yes. So that was,
okay,
that's the I mean, and that's, sometimes like the edgy name of band will hook you in, and that was definitely something that caught my interest. But like,
sure,
they were kind of the darlings of campus radio in the early '90s. Specifically, they had an EP that was recorded. It was mostly live recordings called "Clown Heaven and Hell." That got a lot of play on CHSR when I first started volunteering there back in the day, and I think it was actually one of the first things that I remember making a home copy of from the record library, on on the cassette decks there.
hmm
um, and yeah, they were pretty much as much, they're like a mix of ska, reggae, jazz, punk, like polka. They sang in 3 different languages. They had a weird thing with like, it was like, they were very, their live shows were very theatrical. Like they had different costumes for different songs and like kind of recurring bits. Um and like, yeah, like each, on their first, in their debut album, Shiva Space Machine, each member of the band even had like sort of a circus role. It's as cheesy as it is. Like they were very much
wow,
like that kind of thing. Like this is very
Cirque du
much like,
Soleil vibes
this is
almost.
this is weaponized arts grants who knows somebody who can write a fact, who can, who can get approval to get an album recorded, that sort of thing. Like, these are the theater,
Weaponized arts grants.
yeah, these are
Very,
the
very
theater
good.
nerds. These are the theater nerds, like moving into the music sphere kind of deal. That's what it always
Fantastic.
felt like. And yeah, they were just like, I know Montreal, like that's where like Stomp Records is from, and like the Planet Smashers, who were bigger sort of later on that decade and into the aughts, and are still like, I think Stomp Records is still going. And that's kind of been like, as far as the Canadian ska scene as it is, like that's been one of the sort of focal points. And like Me Mom and Morgenthaler were kind of the big thing in Montreal that led up to that. And yeah, they were just like, yeah, like it's ridiculous. Like looking back at it now, like they recorded one of those Ear to the Ground specials on CBC in the early '90s that I ended up
Sweet.
revisiting for this, and it's pretty cringy stuff in retrospect. To be very, yeah, like it's very sincere, but at the same time, it's like, yeah, you are such like just. It's like theater kids with a stage now and some things to say, and some accordions and trombones as well.
Some
But at the same time, it's like I can't deny that part of like my musical journey, and like revisiting it now, like some of their songs are still like, they wrote some great songs, and like I said, they just seem very Montreal to me in the fact that it's like English, French, and Spanish, and like drawing in all these different influences, and like even in my notes I had a joke like, welcome to Montreal, here's your accordion. Just to see like so many band, like that's just like if you're gonna have a band that's gonna be like, oh no, we're like a hardcore band with a singing saw player, like, it's gonna be a band from Montreal. And they're just kind of like the ska wing of that to me. And unfortunately none of their stuff is really up on streaming, but all of their albums are available on Bandcamp, and there's a few things here and there up on YouTube. Like I said, they were around sort of from the late 80s until probably the mid 90s. They have they put out that EP, Clown Heaven and Hell, then the one full-length Shiva Space Machine, and then they re-released Clown Heaven and Hell with a bunch of other songs under the name We Are Revolting, just was like sort of like a, here's everything else besides our full length kind of collection. And that's up on the Bandcamp too.
Nice.
And they got back together in sort of the early part of the pandemic, I guess, to record a new song called Racist Friend 2020. That's just the chorus is, if you have a racist friend, your friendship should probably end. But
Sound advice.
yeah, and it's so I don't know how active they are beyond that. And like I said, they're definitely a band of a certain time. And in revisiting it, it's just like, oh, it's kind of hard to revisit without thinking like, oh yeah, I was just the kind of fucking dork that just loved that sort of stuff, Give me a song in like heavy Quebecois French about anarchy, I'm into it. Like,
well, okay, so there's a New Brunswick, I think natural Anglophone, desire for things Acadian, and by extension, a desire for, Quebec, right? Quebec stuff. So I think what you're speaking to there kind of taps into that a bit. I just, some of what you were just speaking to there. Okay, so I wasn't aware, I was aware of like the Planet Smashers as being like a Much Music kind of level alternative band.
Mm-hmm.
I was not aware of them, being from Quebec. So or from Montreal. So that's some new info for
I've
me.
opened for the Planet Smashers.
What? Okay.
Yeah. When I lived in Calgary, the like cheesy cheesy metal hardcore band that I played in with like the guy who did my straight edge tattoo.
Okay.
We ended up getting thrown on a bill kind of at the last minute with the Planet Smashers, and it was a big benefit. It was like a big sort of fundraiser show, and the Planet Smashers headlined. Some band from Montreal who I think are still around called Slaves on Dope, who are like just really bad nu metal band. Like, I think they had an in-store at the mall and then found out there was just a show happening and the Planet Smashers were on it. So like, hey, what's up, Montreal bros? And like, it was like the Planet Smashers and a bunch of like, kind of like underground punk type bands for the most part. And just like those guys it was just like them and their 5 friends that were also with them at the mall, like kind of hanging out on their own. And then everybody else just not sure of it. But Planet Smashers were good. I definitely enjoyed them as well. That was sort of towards the end of my really actively being, following ska as a subgenre. I've always kind of enjoyed, here or there. These days, I do enjoy the YouTube channel, the Ska Tune Network.
What? Okay.
Which it's the musician Jer. I don't know if you've ever heard of them at all. Just Jer. Who's put out a pretty great album in 2022. It's Jer just doing ska covers of popular songs, like, but it's everything from like Phoebe Bridgers to like trying to think of Flagpole Set Up by Harvey Danger was one of the ones I quite enjoyed.
Right on.
Yeah, just a lot of that kind of stuff, and it's like fan requests and that, and it's like, I don't know, it's fun. But yeah, like there was definitely a time where it was one of, yeah, sort of based on it's like I like Operation Ivy, so I guess I like ska now. And then there's like, oh, here's this other weird fucking clown band from Montreal, like
Weird fucking clown band
yeah,
from
weird
Montreal.
clowns with accordions and ideas.
Wow, that's sick, man.
Yeah.
I mean, again, like I just, I sort of, like me, mom, and Morgenthaler. It's like, okay, so it's like the day glow abortion.
Yeah,
Like,
that's kind of what I expected when I first heard it, and then like, yeah, like
whatever. But.
Yeah, like when I first heard of the name, I was expecting it to be something, yeah, more like, yeah, just edgy for edgy's sake, and it's
right. But
it's humor. I mean, yeah, it's kind of humorous ska music, I guess, for the most part. But like I said, they do have, the members of the band definitely. I mean, a lot of their politics are like sort of the early '90s, like don't sell out to the man type stuff.
Well,
but still,
okay, so,
it's coming from a good place.
Well, I mean, that's kind of the essence of, kind of good ska. I mean,
yeah.
My understanding, like Skank Pickle, right? I mean,
they were another band actually. Dean, the guy that owned Purple Haze Records in Fredericton,
yep.
He and I bonded over Skank and Pickle, and when they first opened up.
I just got into the pickle vis-a-vis my like just ordering a bunch of stuff from Asian Man Records. So, no, man, and two-tone, like Unity, like all that, good stuff that other people can speak to with way more eloquence and knowledge. Sean
I was just gonna say we do have one friend in mutual who could I believe lives in Quebec, who could probably school us both very deeply on the genre.
We stand like schooled out of the podcast
exactly
if he were here. But,
exactly, that could be like a bonus episode sometime.
Yeah, I mean, if he's willing. I mean,
if he's willing,
if you're able and willing, Sean, we'd love to have you.
But yeah, just in my sort of teenage dalliances with the genre, they were one of my favorites. So yeah, that's my first pick.
Yeah, dope. I've only got really 3 that I can speak to for this episode, so we can definitely spend some more time on yours. But one of the ones
right, we can do that.
But one of the ones that isn't, ones that isn't the 3 that I was like, I could do a thing about this, but I'll. Did you know that Corey Hart is from Quebec?
I think I knew that just because I knew that there was like a some sort of, I think I knew that, but still, Corey Hart.
I'm going to do a half of a thing on Corey Hart because I got space to kill in my thing here. I'll just say that Corey Hart and Bryan Adams, right, were like the 2 musical artists that I started listening to at age 5, along with Michael Jackson, right? Like Michael Jackson with the Thriller record and Bryan Adams with the Reckless record. And then, Corey Hart with whatever Never Surrender is on. Sort of, that was my kind of initiation in pop music when I was like 5 years old. So, I mean, as far as it goes, I'm pretty, impressed with myself for having my own sense of musical taste cultivated and elevated by, certain adults. My pal John Bowie, who I've mentioned a lot on this show, in the grade 5, sphere of things, like his parents actually got him a leather jacket, and they allowed him to spike his hair. And it was just like, that was some cool ass stuff, and I was trying to be, just wearing a white t-shirt and like I had blonde hair and it was just kind of messy. I'm like, I can be Bryan Adams, sort of, a poor man's Bryan Adams, but you, my friend, are cultivating the Corey Hart thing to very, very high level. And it wasn't until it's not like you move on in your life, as you obviously do, but it wasn't until watching what the 3rd most recent season of Stranger Things, where the first episode of the season starts out with Never Surrender, I think it is, and 11 and the little gimp she's going out with, like making out, and like yes, 80s nostalgia, and it was like they weren't even. It's not even a Canadian show, so I got that like kind of self-loathing, kind of flutter in my heart when something Canadian, ostensibly Canadian, gets recognized in a really broad American media format, you know. And when the night is cold, it's like, man, you're like, it's still, I'm like, I'm a middle-aged man, middle-aged white North American, whatever, and I'm clearly the target audience for the show, and they were just hook, throwing out the hook and reeling me in, and I'm going, yeah, yeah, yeah. I don't even like this show, but yeah, I'm gonna keep watching this. So, a little mini segment on Corey Hart, who I understand is still in the biz. I think I follow him on Instagram. I don't know if his like musical output has really been significant, beyond the boy in the box era, the wearing his sunglasses, the wearing his sunglasses at night era, but still, right? I mean, there's people who are still riding their shtick on a hell of a lot less. So I didn't really anticipate, being able to spend 5 or 7 minutes about Corey Hart on the show, because I just figured I'll just jump into, the St. Catharines, who are my first real pick, and kind of elaborate. But I just, it's like, okay, it's formative. I can't deny that it had a piece of my psyche associated with it. And part of my, it's like one of the first 5 albums that I owned, right? Like including, like the Bryan Adams and like John Cougar Mellencamp's Scarecrow, maybe the We Are the World, except the Canadian version of that. What is Tears Are Not Enough? Tears Are Not Enough. The Holiday, classic, right? And if you look at that roster, it's still pretty tight. It's still, I mean, a lot of the, it's like Gordon Lightfoot's in that, Rest Your Soul. Neil Young is in that. He's not going to be alive much longer, surely. And you got Corey Hart, Bryan Adams, and Anne Murray. So I mean, he was like among the pantheon at the time, circa 1983, 1984.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, he was as mainstream and widely felt as any Canadian artist of the day. And yeah, I mean, he's Stranger Things, that episode. I'm like, yeah, reel me in, American pop culture, monolith. Just bring my eyeballs to your thing a little bit longer to watch your advertising, right? So yeah, okay, a unintended digression, but I'm going to stand by it. I'm going to own that. And now for something probably a little bit more substantive, a little bit more realistically attenuated to the spirit of the show. Dan, what is your second pick, please?
My second pick, I might as well go with the band that really inspired, first helped inspire the show, or the topic for me, which is the Nils.
Okay. I've heard of them, and I have not heard them. So tell me about
it. Honestly, I think they'd be right up your alley. They're basically sort of the Canadian. I've seen that they were described as, they could have been the Canadian Replacements.
Ooh, well, okay.
And they were they originally started in 1978 by brothers Alex and Carlos Soria, and really kind of became a real band, by like the early 80s. And like they were the band that, like, if like the Ramones were coming through town in like 1982, the Nils would be the band that would open for them in Montreal. And yeah, just like kind of like heavy melodic sound, kind of, they were even though we were, described Montreal as, Canada's San Francisco in a lot of ways earlier, the Nils were kind of like Canada's Minneapolis sound band, sort of parallel to all that was happening in Minneapolis.
Very
Just
cool.
like, yeah, just in and they attracted some big label attention, and ended up being one of the few bands signed to a label called Rockhouse Records, which
Okay.
was the rock division of Profile Records, which was a pretty well-known hip-hop label. But they didn't really put a lot of money into Rockhouse Records, and the Nils got locked into like a 7-album deal or something. They did put out a couple records that were quite, people, they had a self-titled album, and I can't remember the other album's name that they put out, but yeah, it was like there was very little budget and promotion. It was hard, there weren't that many copies out there, but it was still, they were a beloved band during their existence. They ended up going on hiatus for a little while in the late 80s, and then getting back together in 1992 when their record deal expired, to play a few shows, and then an indie label from Montreal called Magwheel Records reissued a bunch of their stuff. That's how I first heard them.
Okay.
And yeah, it's just like one of the sounds that I think of as like the Montreal sound is like sort of big melodic, kind of like not quite pop punk, but like melodic rock punk, sort of like the Doughboys are sort of like the biggest, most archetypal band of that sound.
There we go. There we go.
And also there were other bands,
That's...
but other bands kind of similar, like the Asexuals, who kind of traded, there was some member crossover with the Doughboys at different times, and also another band called Rise, who were like some folks from Newfoundland living in Montreal for a while. But anyways, yeah, it was like there was this whole little like kind of, it was like the dreadlock dudes on a skateboard, like melodic rock punk sound kind of thing. And the Nils were kind of the band that sort of set all those bands saw and were inspired by. And they get back together every once in a while. Alex Soria passed away in 2004, but Carlos Soria's kind of still been putting together different lineups and performing their songs every once in a while. And yeah, they're playing in Fredericton at the end of the summer.
Wow.
Amongst other places,
sure.
with like Neighborhood Watch, like a little event that the folks in Neighborhood Watch are organizing, who are sort of, folks some
that's
a similar vintage.
Grant,
exactly.
The person who, he's an institution in
exactly.
Right?
But yeah, like the Nils are definitely, they were kind of one of the, pioneer bands of just that kind of melodic punk, kind of like Husker Du-ish, early Replacements-ish sound, sort of on the Canadian side of things.
Neat.
And yeah, so they were my number 2 pick.
That's cool. And again, just as you're sort of speaking to some of this, and I'm just remembering now, that the Doughboys record that was everywhere, after Nirvana got popular.
Mm-hmm.
It'll take me to Google to get to the name of it, but I remember the graphic on the front of it very clearly. And like dreadlocks and just like. You know which one I'm talking about.
I do know which one you're talking about. And that guy, John Kastner, that sang for them. Yes. It's funny in retrospect, like, I don't know if you ever got into the show Mad Men at all.
Yeah, a bit, yeah.
Yeah, but the actress that plays Megan Draper, Jessica Paré, she's from like the Montreal punk scene and was dating John Kastner for a long time and would just be at Doughboys shows just like unimpressed. Like when they're like, we go with them on tour and just be like not stoked on the locals a lot of the time, I guess. And like folks I know from the Montreal scene of that era are just like, oh yeah, no, she was around. Like, and it's just funny seeing her part of this big like iconic TV show. Just like, oh yeah, there's like just somebody from the scene back in the day.
And everyone's like, so there was a musician in your life at one point, and like, so it's just funny how the thing turns. And I'm really, you got a really easy and granular knowledge of some of this stuff. I got to say, like, that's pretty like bar trivia, superhero level stuff right there, man. That's decent.
All right.
Well, before I kind of I've kind of outed myself speaking about St. Catherine's. Just as we're talking here, I'm just going to, allow myself to try and form some new knowledge in the course of this recording. There were like a bunch of bands from Montreal right around the aughts with like based around the Wolf thing. Were there not? There was Wolf Parade and there was AIDS Wolf. So
they were very different bands.
Okay.
Actually, I know some of the dudes in Wolf Parade. Just because it's all folks in the Victoria scene that moved to Montreal.
Really? Okay.
Yeah. Actually, Supreme Echo Records that I've talked about on the show previously, the like reissues label from Victoria. Yep. Their next release is going to be Haji from Wolf Parade's old grindcore band Jonas. He's reissuing their demo from the early '90s on vinyl. And it's pretty good from what I remember, but it's like the keyboard synth guy from Wolf Parade used to sing in this like crazy grindcore band.
So like there was a period, like I mean, I lived in Montreal for like basically a summer, and it was like the summer that I graduated from St. Thomas with my English degree, and it was like living in just like this. Converted industrial space in St. Henry.
I think. Oh God, I remember that place. Is that where that's where Mike Beattie lived for a while?
Mike Beattie, Cynthia,
I was
John
there. I remember
like
that warehouse space. Yeah. I actually went to see one of the other bands on my list the night before I went to that warehouse.
I was there for 3 months. It overlapped with September 11th.
Oh wow, there's time to be there.
Yeah, it was pretty grim. But I remember just being, pretty shit-faced every day, all day, riding the metro, and then going to like garage rock shows, like garage rock shows, off of St. Catherine, basically thereabouts. And it's just some really, and it was like, saw Tav Falco play there.
Oh wow.
And Panther Burns. That was kind of like one of the more memorable ones that kind of stood out. But I mean, it just the whole era. It just seemed like you couldn't sort of turn your head without kind of bumping into a garage rock band, and they all would play "Sunday You Need Love" by Trio. Like Sunday you need love, Monday you alone. Like they all kind of seemed like they dug the Oblivions a lot. And I just sort of was thinking, okay, so is this like Wolf Parade like of that kind of
those
thing, or
Wolf Parade is they're like dudes from the that were part of like the punk scene in the Victoria in the late '90s. Who all moved to Montreal. There was just like a wave of folks.
They just decided to strike out for. Okay.
Actually, their first music video, or one of their first music videos. What's the song called? One of their early music videos actually has one of my housemates from like the punk house I lived at in Victoria.
Okay.
Just a sec. I'm just quickly looking up what song that is.
No, man, like this is important information. So
but it's something I found and that was how I first kind of heard about them. Was like there was like Keith Jones is in a video, actually the person in the video is actually a really great visual artist based in Montreal, who's done like some album cover work and stuff. But I'm just sorry the live Googling here.
That's please. I mean, that's
one of the things on. I think it's "Shine a Light." That song.
Okay.
But anyways, no, those are sort of folks that were part of like the Victoria punk scene. Actually, Dan Buechner, that sings and I think plays bass for them. He was in earlier lineups of Daddy's Hands, who I talked about on the show as well. But so they're like all West Coast folks. AIDS Wolf, I know, are like a noise band, I think.
I don't know that Wikipedia tells me. And
yes.
some things to follow up on.
Exactly.
At least from my standpoint. And what I'm digging about the show is like, since our last episode, which it only got put up a few days ago, but we recorded it a couple of weeks ago.
Yep.
I've been subsequently actually going after Discogs stuff because I've kind of there's only so far. Kamloops is a small place. And there's only kind of so far I can go with my local shop because there's just one, vinyl shop here that's worth anything. So, and Amazon, again, it's like you can only go so far. So as much as, I'm kind of throwing some of this stuff out just to kind of see if it sticks to kind of also help plot my next Discogs, trip. So yeah, man. Well, thanks for that. That's kind of helpful for me. I'm just so yeah. I mean, St. Catherine's. This is just a band that I one of the things about being unemployed for a while is that I've had a lot of chance to kind of dive into my ridiculous vinyl collecting, which I went so far as to count the vinyl the other week, and I'm at 804.
Wow.
And yeah, and prior to separating from my wife 2 years ago, I had just kind of 10 records that were just kind of sitting there, right? So I don't want to sort of do the math on how much of my RSPs and EI money that I've burned through to build that up. But I like to think that if I had maintained vinyl over the years instead of kind of just chucking it all when I moved overseas, that I would sort of maybe still be at a similar level. That's how I'm justifying it to myself. That's one of the ways. And I guess further to that, just because, it's like I've got all the replacements records, in every format. I've got all the Husker Du records that Greg Ginn will allow to be refreshed, because of legalities, and he's a weirdo and he won't let those records be reprinted for the most part. So you just kind of start to go outwards from the things your base kind of stuff to stuff that sounds more like it. So through just my natural affinity for Leatherface, for my natural affinity for hot water music, which have kind of stood the test of time, the St. Catherine's for Montreal actually are of that kind of. I'm not going to call them emo, but they're not like your crust punk whatever scumbags either. From Montreal, they actually they did the trajectory that you see a lot of bands, the more established U.S. bands, in that they put out some music on Fat Records. They got that kind of level of notoriety. They actually left Montreal, moved down to Florida, possibly, because of, No Idea Records and, and just that whole scene. I'd have to, Google specifically where they were kind of based there. But in so doing, they ended up putting out, a pretty impressive discography for about more than 10 years, probably closer to 15 years of being active, and they're no longer active. But they've gotten back together since breaking up from time to time, I believe, and they're one of their 2010 album Fireworks is just something that I really within the past 7 or 8 months of last year. I just kind of ordered it on a whim, and it landed, and I just could not. It was one of my favorite things I was listening to for quite a while, and just from the middle-aged vinyl nerd aspect, it's like this, like transparent with multicolored splatter on it, and it's just a beautiful aesthetic object. Nice photography. and then this really just kind of sad, downer, but still kind of propulsive. You can shake your fist to it, kind of punk anthems with the Quebecois flair, I suppose. So I mean, as much as I've got some other bands to talk about, like for instance yesterday's Ring, Meditation. I mean, those are kind of the two that I'll probably talk to a little bit more while we're on here. But they all are basically of the same group of people, more or less, who have just been doing various cool stuff over the past 10 or 15 years, and in some cases are still active. So as we're kind of uncovering things here, I've got the Wikipedia page for AIDS Wolf up in front of me, and I'm looking at it, and it's like, so one of the people from Arcade Fire, is it?
Oh, of course,
was it AIDS Wolf?
I feel like that's another like. I feel like that's another thing. It's like, welcome to Montreal. Here's your accordion. Your shift in the Arcade Fire will be next June, from the 5th until the 17th. Once you've done your prescribed time in the Arcade Fire, you'll be able to proceed to like get your Quebec health card.
You'll be the third tambourine player on a tour, or something like
exactly.
That, right? They got canceled, I understand.
I think Win Butler did some like
some sleazy stuff behind his wife's back, some middle-aged man stuff, which I'm a sleazy middle-aged man, so I'm like, he's more sleazy than me because he was married when the shenanigans went on and consent and all that. I actually saw the Arcade Fire when they opened for U2. I've seen you somehow. I managed to see U2 3 times. One of them was in Montreal, and then one of them was in Moncton. So there's this kind of weird, Franco/Acadian kind of thing to my experience with them. And actually, Arcade Fire. I mean, I was standing in the mud for 6 hours. I wouldn't do it again. I wouldn't, go to Magnetic Hill to see U2 again. I'm sure of it under any circumstances. But I was there, and I was prepared to be more miserable than I was. And they were taking it seriously. They were taking the gig seriously. So, I mean, I guess shout out to them for that. And I don't know if our person from AIDS Wolf was on the stage at that point, or if some other transients who had been living in Montreal for a couple of months and needed their health care were doing their shift at that time and went on that tour. But there we go. We managed to kind of shoehorn in Corey Hart, AIDS Wolf, and Arcade Fire. So we're adding value to the show as we go. Dan, please help me out here, bud. What's your third choice?
I guess if we're talking big, sprawling musical collectives from Montreal,
which we were, yes,
we were. Might as well talk about another one, which is Godspeed You Black Emperor.
Fuck. They played Kelowna recently, like last year, and I found out about it like 2 days before.
Oh no!
And it was sold out. I wasn't able to go, but shit, I would have loved to have seen Godspeed You Black Emperor. So thank you for bringing them in. Tell me more about them, Dan, please.
Well, they originally started in 1994. It's been a guy named Ephraim Menick is it's a guitar player and kind of the central person. There's a bunch of other people that have been part of the, that are generally part of the band that have been parts at different times. Like I said, big sprawling collective. They kind of just invented their own genre almost.
Is it like post-rock?
Or at least kind of, I mean, I guess post-rock. I heard post-rock applied to other bands like Tortoise and stuff like that before them as well. Yeah. But it's like, but it's just, it's this big, sprawling, spooky, there's a reason why one of their songs is like in the background of a key moment of the movie 28 Days Later. But like
really?
at the same time, yeah, the song East Hastings, which every time I hear that song, there's a recording of like a street preacher at the beginning who I remember seeing on the street all the time whenever I'd go to Vancouver, who's like an older woman from somewhere. I think she was from somewhere in the Caribbean, possibly. Like she had, yeah. Anyways, like a heavy accent, sort of like from that general area, who would just scream about Jesus on the street in Vancouver on East Hastings, and that's the song East Hastings by Godspeed You Black Emperor. Starts with a sample of the street preacher.
So these people are from Montreal.
They're from Montreal.
Okay.
Yeah, and like I said, big kind of sprawling group. You know, like a lot of different string instruments and horns, different percussionists. There's like a ton of different side projects as well. But like, you know, it's like for a big kind of arty instrumental band, they were always very vocal about their politics. Like for a band with very little to no lyrics at all, they were very vocal about their politics in their interviews, which I always found, you know, an interesting mix.
So like just wildly left wing. Like
yes, vegan, exactly. Like very like, you know, very like for the most part, like I used to always go whenever like like when I used to visit Montreal a lot, sort of in the late 90s and early aughts. There was like a volunteer-run anarchist bookstore I would always go to because they usually had some pretty cool stuff. And the drummer from Godspeed You Black Emperor was usually working there. Like if I went in, he was just kind of like this kooky older guy who's also like a DJ and was like playing drums for them. Aiden something or other. He also has a solo project, One Speed Bike, that's like kind of like weird Godspeed meets electronic music. But yeah, it's just like a bunch of folks like that who are all just like crazy, super far left political, but like let's just make giant spooky, like 20-minute long, like just like emotionally driving instrumental songs. And it just always, they're one of those groups that I like when they first came out, like so many people I knew just freaked out about them and got so excited about them from like all different, you know, but from different angles. Like, because there was a band called Neurosis that were really popular, sort of on the heavier end of things. Yep. And a lot of their songs would have these kind of like cool, like kind of like quiet melodic breakdowns with like strings and horns and that kind of stuff. And when Godspeed You Black Emperor first came out, everyone was like, it's like that part of those, it's like those parts of Neurosis songs, but as an entire band. And just like taking that and going with it, you know, mixed with like spaghetti Western soundtracks, you know, almost like spaghetti Western kind of soundtrack stuff. And like orchestral music and all that together, just, like I said, these big, you know, and like most of the records are like double and triple LPs. And but they're still going. Like I said, you know, they played, you
Kelowna,
like Kelowna, like a year, you know, like they still, I think they took a little break and then sort of got back together around 2010. They were nominated for the Polaris Prize in like the early 2000 teens. Or I think they won it in the early 2000 teens. And they've still just kind of been going for a long time. And actually here, since, I will go with, I had a hard time narrowing my list down. And I had two very different artists that are almost like polar opposites that I had a hard time.
So please, go ahead,
it was Godspeed You Black Emperor on one side, just for the last spot. The last contestants were Godspeed You Black Emperor on one side, and the Ripcords on the other.
I forgot about the Ripcords.
Here's the thing, though.
Shit.
I don't really. They're a band that's more like, I respect them more than I actively listen to them. Yeah. But at the same time, like, I really appreciate them, and I really appreciate Paul Gott, the singer, guitarist of the Ripcords. Like, he's really, even like the past couple of years, like during the pandemic, he created this huge Facebook group. There was just like Punk Canada that started with just everybody he remembered meeting at a show that he could find on social media. He added to this group. It's like, hey guys, we're, you know, shit's weird and nobody's getting out very often. So, here we can just talk. You're all people that I remember from like around Canada, so invite your friends. And it kind of went through the life cycle of like this scene in a microcosm, and like, oh hey, this is great, everyone's getting along. Oh, these people are fighting, these people are fighting. Oh, this person's a mod, this person's melting down. I think it's shutting down. I don't know. Oh, it's like, oh no, the venue's closed. Oh wait, someone's rescued it at the last minute. And it's kind of not as active as it was, but there was probably a good 18-month span where like that's how I reconnected with Jason from Supreme Echo. And like one of the other bands on my list, Conditions Apply, Steve Lump, that plays bass and sings for them, who's somebody that I've enjoyed. It's one of those like tangled web across many projects, folks, who like I've appreciated a lot. I've enjoyed a lot of his bands. Like reconnected with him and like other people through this group that Paul from the Ripcord started. That was just like, hey friends, and like he's still actively touring. He's like, if people wanted to, are looking for tour tips, he'll give it to them. He tried to start a Canadian version of Maximum Rock and Roll in the 90s, On Guard Quarterly, where he would like anybody, there's like everybody, folks in pretty much every city he went to on tour, he's just like, send me a scene report, please.
Yeah.
Just tell me what's going on in your town and I'll publish it in this magazine that I'm financing myself through selling ads.
Yeah.
And like you'd get copies of it in records, and it only ran for a couple of years, but like, it covered bands, like they tried to cover bands from all across Canada. And like, they've really, that's one thing, even though, like I said, I don't listen to the Ripcords music that often, but they're like every 17-year-old punk's perfect ideal of like, a fast funk punk band. And
I feel like they played Fredericton like
they play Fredericton regularly. I think they're playing Fredericton soon. Like, they're just constantly going. And they're one of those bands that like, like there was a time where I was super into their music and then I just kind of, I moved past it. But there's other people, it's still there for other people sort of in that space, sort of in that sort of space where that music is like what you're going to get into. Like it's there for them, and the guy is still going. It's funny, through like being connected on social media and stuff, it's like he works at like TV news and has worked in TV news forever, and is like, and then has just been using that to finance this like, punk band that tours constantly. And like, they'll be the band that makes sure to go to some shitty little small town that some kid, that's going to be their favorite show that summer, because they were like, the other town band came to see them, and it was the Ripcords, because they're always touring. And I just thought, like, it's like, when I think of like Montreal band, it's like Montreal, you get the really arty high concept bands, and then just those really like street gritty kind of bands. And it's like those two were kind of fighting for the final spot on my list. But I figured I had to talk about the Ripcords and Paul Gott, and just sort of the ways that he's tried to sort of keep, keep members of the punk rock community like in touch in various ways, over the years, and like how I thought that's really cool,
Well, I mean, I think really, the fact, like the guy works in television news or whatever. I mean, I'm just like, the further you kind of get into your life, the more I certainly, for me, value, like my creative, things, such as I can sort of build it, and also, it not just like it makes the day job more tolerable, but I mean, kind of, like it's a consistency, right? It's like a thing of like, it's a tie to who you were maybe before the edifice of your career, or whatever kind of more circumstantial things, that you have going on. Like, so, for me, like, I'm wearing a Husker Du shirt, it's like, I got their logo tattooed on my arm when I was like 19 years old. And it's like, do I actually take down, the expanded 4-record thing of this and listen to it all the time? I do not. I do not. But, I value that it was there. It did and still contributes, to my sense of personhood or whatnot. And, the fact, like, that we have this podcast, the fact, for me, like, writing was kind of my thing.
Yeah.
I've got this, I've sort of using now the podcasts to sort of ladder into coming up with a literary online publication, which I'm going to be kind of making public here pretty soon. And that's, the stuff that kind of, keeps me feeling like I am who I was when I was 20, when I was 15, when I was 30. And, I'm a couple of weeks away from turning 45 here, right? So
Ooh.
halfway through my life at the best circumstances, right? I mean, I got a grandpa still alive who's 90. And he's still sharp, which kind of gives me some, hope. But I'm like, I don't know that I'll be necessarily still sporting, the land speed record merch, at that point. But, for somebody who's like even older, like of, the 10 or whatever years older that, this person from the Ripcords is still, maintaining that part of who he is, still keeping that alive, for the people who, he comes in contact with who still value it. I mean, I don't know, that's commendable. And so, like, whether or not you want to get your street punk on, every other week or whatever is kind of almost beside the point in terms of respecting and appreciating the endeavor.
Exactly.
Which, when I look at, the two other artists that I kind of mentioned in terms of being associated with St. Catherine's, Yesterday's Ring, I mean, that's almost like, it seems like just a lot of, punk fans of, the early aughts and whatever had some variety of an acoustic or folk kind of offshoot here, I don't know if that resonates with you or not, but I'm thinking like with Hot Water Music, they have Rumble Seat, I'm thinking like there's a lot of these musicians, right, who just, they kind of do their acoustic thing off on the side, and Yesterday's Ring, it's sort of a Montreal variety of that with, I think, the singer and then the two guitar players. So 3 out of the 6 from St. Catherine's, plus whatever drummer they can conscript, who have put out at least a handful of records, including on Fat Records, including on, a couple of things that are like more indie than that or self-released. And it was one of their records that I found, Goodbye Nightlife, within the past 6 months, where in the wake of my divorce, in the wake of my career kind of taking a dive, in the wake of being a single dad, I'm like, I can hear some of the themes of, these people who were angry 20-something-year-olds who are now, anxious, whatever, middle 40s Canadian people. And that relatability factor, is really strong for me. So, I think scenes are evolving, and in terms of guitar-based music that we're really, I think, both partial to, it's on its way out. It's like the Maritime's got like an aging demographic. Punk, and guitar-based music largely has an aging demographic. I mean, emo, as far as I'm concerned, is like contemporary dad rock now, for the most part. I stand to be corrected, but yeah, man. So I think I kind of just threw out, the last that I'm able to reasonably contribute here, having, also given some props to Corey Hart, Arcade Fire, and bands with the name Wolf in the title that I haven't listened to, but now I'm gonna. So what else we got here?
All right. I've got a couple other things here.
Please do.
In terms of like sort of old guys who keep sort of keeping it going. There's a band that I guess dating back to the 80s that I've managed to see a couple times live that, like, I can't say they're my favorite band on record all the time, but their live shows have been entertaining for different reasons. and
Okay.
I love them for what they are, and that's Voivod.
Oh
Um,
man, I thought of
who
them, but I
Yeah,
couldn't. I
they're
listened
just
to them enough
for those
to.
unfamiliar, they're Quebec-based. They started out thrash metal. They're back sort of at thrash metal. They had a little more of like they
I
tried
think
more of
they
like a
were.
spacey melodic rock
I thought of them as
thing
being
for a
like
while.
prog
Like,
rock metal
yeah, they
ish,
kind of
right?
went like their biggest hit, I think, was or one of their two biggest hits was a cover of like a Sid Barrett era Pink Floyd song, "Astronomy Domine." But that was and that was on I think Angel Rat was the album that came out on. I can't remember. It's um
Jason
their album from
Newsted from
19 yeah,
Metallica was on
Jason
that.
News, yeah,
Yeah.
they've had an arc. They started out in the sort of the mid 80s with the album and yeah, it's just like fast dirty thrash with sci-fi lyrics that are usually, sort of metaphors for like trying to make a little bit of social commentary and stuff, but also, just songs about robots and that sort of thing. And just kind of, yeah, like they had a very trademark like visual art style in their early albums too. Like that was just like, it wasn't derivative of, I feel like a lot of metal album covers, like, Metallica went with the artist Pusshead for a lot of their stuff, and like a lot of people sort of like bit that style, and then Voivod had their own particular aesthetic that went with this kind of weird, almost like cyberpunk metal thing they had going on. And yeah, went through a variety of different lineup changes. Their bass player quit for a while, and Jason Newsted joined the band. The singer and bassist quit, and they replaced him with a guy from Denmark, I think, who the first time I saw them live, that was the line opening for Neurosis. Actually, uh, it was the three-piece Voivod lineup with the Danish guy and then guitarist Piggy, their guitarist who just went by the name Piggy, and I can't remember it was like the original drummer anyway, and yeah. So when I first went to go to the show, I was waiting for some friends outside, and I kept seeing these three kind of like dirtbag dudes in flannel shirts and sweatpants and like, just like the Nike sports sandal kind of things and like long greasy hair, just like going out behind the dumpster and smoking joints with different people and coming back. And I was waiting for probably like 45 minutes for my friends to show up before I went into the show, and I just kept seeing these guys going out with different groups of people. And then when I got inside, I look up on stage, and there's those three dirtbag guys on stage, and like, hey, we're Voivod. And then,
They're not just
they
dirtbags,
played this
they're the
great
headliners.
set, even though it was kind of like they had like a ringer vocalist doing double duty on bass as well. But it was still, like half of the original band, and like, they put on like a pretty fun set. And yeah, and so I see them like by the bar after they finished playing, and it's like, oh hey, how's it going, guys? And it's like, that was really great. And they're like, yeah, that's nice. So you got any weed? It's like, you were
Otherwise,
you headed outside? It's real nice, being the opening band and respect is nice and all, but we're here in the States, and
you can't smoke your respect.
yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
It's like, we'd really appreciate it's like if you felt like buying some drinks, or if you were headed outside, if you wanted to take us with you, we'd greatly appreciate it. And so that solved the mystery of why I kept seeing these three dirtbag dudes just going outside with various people. Because anyone who
Well
walked up and said,
played.
"Hey,
Yeah.
I love your band," they'd be like, "Great. So what are you doing?"
Show us the love. Yeah.
Exactly. But then I got to see them again years later at the Halifax Pop Explosion, probably like 2016, 2017. It was not long after the original guitarist passed away.
Okay.
But the other 3/4 of the original lineup, including the original vocalist, were back together, just like a new guitarist. And I've never seen a band look like they were just having so much fucking fun.
Awesome.
Like more than I've seen. Like Voivod just seemed to be enjoying themselves more than any, and it's just like, these like 50, 60 something year old Quebecois dudes playing thrash metal songs about robots, and just having the time of their lives. And I'm just like, yeah, no, this is great. I do, and their early albums, like they were kind of pioneer. Like they had like the early albums, their singer used kind of like a higher, like screechier vocal style, like a lot of kind of the heavier hardcore bands would use later on. And I know that like Rorschach, who are one of the early kind of like heavy hardcore bands to use that screechy vocal style, their singer had mentioned that early Voivod records are one of his inspirations. So
cool.
We can thank / blame them for that.
Yeah.
And yeah, just like they had, even on like their fast thrashy stuff, they still had like a weird prog edge. And yeah, they definitely leaned deep into the prog side of things for a bit there. And I mean, that wasn't my favorite, but like, just like for what it is. And like that's one thing I associate with metal, with Quebec, is like ridiculous metal. Because there's a fair bit of it there. And Voivod are kind of like the forefathers of a lot of that.
Well, I mean,
in the best way.
If it's right in front of you, like at a show or something, I mean, why wouldn't you, embrace it, right?
Exactly. And like both times that I saw them, like it was just a great live show. So yeah, that was one of my picks.
Sure.
Let's see here. I had a couple other ones that I'll just kind of rush through.
Sure.
One of them actually ties back to some of the stuff we talked about last week, that being Great American Steak Religion Records.
Awesome.
And another band that was on that label, Jonah, and those who were from Quebec City, and their later project, Born Dead Icons.
Oh, hell, yes. They played Fredericton as well,
Yes.
Yeah.
And they were another band from the early, they were a band from, I guess they started like 1999 or so.
Okay.
But I was a big fan of Jonah when they were around. Like their 7-inch was one of my favorite records of that time. And then when I found out that like 3/5 of Jonah became 3/4 of this new band that was like a little more rock and roll, a little kind of dirtier, but not in an ostentatious, like, let's dress up like Fubar kind of way.
Right.
And
the ironic mustache.
Exactly.
And,
like they're not like, it wasn't like ironic mustache rock. It was more just like record store guy rock. Is record store guy hardcore is the way that I describe them. Because like, they were like, guys who came from kind of like the screamo-ish place, who went in like a little more almost Motorhead direction, but weren't afraid to like throw some like spooky I know Pete Baudouin, their guitar player, is a big fan of like Susie and the Banshees and like folks like that, or like bands like that. And like the band that most of Born Dead Icons started afterwards, Complications, they leaned a little more in that angle, but it's like they weren't afraid to put like a spooky little like Susie and the Banshees intro somewhere, or like cover a Wipers song. Like, in my notes I had, they made the emo kids listen to Motorhead and the crust punks listen to the Wipers. Like, and like they had 3 albums and a bunch of 7-inches through from like 1999 to 2007. I got to see them once on one of my visits to Montreal. I saw them play at Salle d'Index, the like volunteer runs like space that was there for a while. Yeah, it was a pretty cool show.
Awesome.
But they were, like I said, they were just another band from Quebec that I really enjoyed. So they were one of the ones on my list. I'll just kind of rush through the other 2 here. I'm just trying to see. Oh yeah, I guess I only had one more left actually, and that was a current band, which is Conditions Apply.
Okay. You mentioned them like about 10, 20 minutes ago. Whatever.
Yes, exactly. And in that awkward teenage ska phase of mine, there was a band from Ottawa that I really enjoyed called Lumpen Proletariat. And their bass player was a guy who sort of punk name-wise just went by Steve Lump, who ended up playing in a bunch of other bands like Ballast from... he played in a band in Vancouver called Ballast for a while, who were pretty popular, and then... they moved to Montreal, and then he was in another band called Last Rites for a bit, or no, Last Days, and then another band called Mental Fix, who described themselves as, they were from They sounded like, if Montreal had an East Bay. Um,
Nice.
and that was sort of around the time that I reconnected with him and his music, because that was towards the tail end of time that I was doing stand-up comedy, and ended up doing a couple shows opening for them. And for Mental Fix, Steve's old band, with his partner Marie. And yeah, their new project, the two of them have a new band, with a different guitarist called Conditions Apply now. Um, yeah, they just put out a full-length album in 2022. I know they played Pooza Fest, the big punk fest that happens in Montreal this
Pooza
weekend.
Fest. I would love
Yeah.
to go to a Pooza Fest. Like when I see
Yeah.
the people who like the bands like from, never. I mean, I know that whoever's cool in Quebec is going to be there, but then just like some of the artists that I just follow, just as a regular thing, like one of the dudes from the Lawrence Arms
Mhm.
bringing his guitar, solo guitar thing to that, like it's like the Flatliners,
Yeah, yeah.
like just contemporary touring punk
It's
people from, whatever, like Fat Records, Epitaph,
Yeah.
that whole strata end up playing that festival,
kind of like
right?
that fest scene almost.
Yeah.
Yeah. And they're like, well, yeah, they're kind of like one of the like upper tier local bands of that sort of part of the scene.
Cool.
And yeah, it's kind of like fast, melodic, but very much like punk. And yeah, like it sounds like a lot of stuff kind of from the East Bay. And yeah, so that was the last.
And what is not to like about
Exactly.
that? Even on principle, right? That's
yeah. And so that was really that was my list for the show. So
well, that's fantastic, man. This has been educational, I gotta say. I mean, I kind of like between job interview stuff and getting the education whatever podcast to a certain level, I didn't really go as far into the research for this episode as I would have preferred. Again, I've got these three kind of bands that I've kind of been listening to a lot. And then kind of some, kind of around that, but this has been something where the notes for me are going to be an opportunity. I mean, I've been scribbling frantically here, just at some of the references because again, some of the things that you kind of touched on have just I literally I haven't thought about the ripcords in decades, right? And I go ahead, man.
Sorry, no, continue. Finish your thought. I just had one thing.
No, man, no, just ripcords or remembering that oh yeah, the Doughboys who were like popular on Much Music for a Minute. There was a whole thing from them. So I mean, honestly, there's enough rabbit holes just in what we sort of uncovered, what you kind of helped to uncover, that I am gonna just be able to take a nice long dig, when the writing part of this happens. So, but please finish up your thought there, bud.
Oh, I was just going to say one last thing is I had one other runner-up that was another sort of more historical pick.
Yeah.
That is the Montreal band Scum, SCUM, who were sort of an 80s vintage kind of like thrash punk band. That they would have played around, like they would come to Fredericton and play shows with Neighborhood Watch when Neighborhood Watch were still around, like that era of things. And when I first started going to shows, I remember there was one guy that had a Scum shirt that I would always see, and I thought it was like such an intense shirt because it was the logo for the Montreal Police Department, the like CUM logo, but just like a spray painted S in front of it. Yeah, and that I always thought it was really intense. And then I finally heard the band when I bought this compilation called Peace, PEA. It was like the acronym for Peace, that was like put up by Maximum Rock and Roll and a few other groups in the early 80s that like had bands like DOA and the Dead Kennedys and stuff, sort of when they were still active bands. And the one band from Eastern Canada that's on it is this band from Montreal, Scum. That I just remember the singer had a very heavy French accent, and the first few lines of the song, but like war on the streets, it's a big disgrace. The cops, they hate me, want to hurt my face. And just with like a very heavy Quebecois accent. And it just stuck with me. And their one full length album that they put out just got reissued last year, and it's worth checking out for sure.
Oh man,
just
that's
for like
awesome.
that vintage of like kind of like 80s hardcore, but like I said, from sort of like the Quebec, from the Montreal side of things, and yeah, like I said, with very heavily French accented English vocals that are pretty entertaining. But anyways, that's it for me.
Well, that's fantastic. Like I said, I think this has been it's been educational for me, and as an educator, within my world, that actually, that signifies a lot. And I'm looking forward to prepping the notes for this. I'm looking forward to seeing where we go on the next exploration, the next steps on the musical journey. This has been quite good. So I guess probably I'm going to bid anybody listening a happy National Patriots Day, happy God Save the King, if that's what they say now on Victoria Day, with
I
the
guess.
invention of Charles what's his face, and spring is fully in swing. The music fests are out there to be had, and quite frankly, we just hope you enjoy the show, and looking forward to next time.
All right, thanks. Talk to you folks later.
Take care, everybody.
See you around.
Bye-bye.